Hey guys, Richard Firminger from Flurry. Thanks for the introduction, Marco. Just a little bit about Flurry in case you don't know who we are. We're the world's most penetrated free analytics for app developers. So reason why I'm on stage is that we track a bewildering number of apps. We track a bewildering number of active devices. So a lot of the trends that I'm going to talk about are not estimates from panels such as a research company. We actually see and watch 1.2 billion monthly active smart devices around the world. Put that in context, that's about 450 million more than Facebook. So I'm up on stage, hopefully credibly, because I can really talk about the actual activity rather than the estimates or the research. So we have kind of like three parts of our business. Analytics, it's used by, I said, 400,000 apps. We power analytics for Rovio, Angry Birds, Half Brick, Fruit Ninja, Kilu, Subway Surfers, Tumblr, Pinterest, Skype, Shazam, The Guardian, The Economist. So we really see an awful lot of activity across apps. That powers an advertising business. On the left, we have App Circle, which is the performance business, cost per install, cost per click, and cost per completed video view. And we've also launched an ad-serving platform, AppSpot, and more recently, a Flurry marketplace. You will have probably heard a lot recently today about real-time bidding. So Flurry is building a real-time bidding platform that enables you to bid by target audience, and we're profiling devices by age, gender, and personas. So that's a quick summary about Flurry. So what are we seeing here? This is a graph of the number of events. So in analytics, you can track instances of a completed action. That might be achieving a level, that might be making an in-app purchase. It could be any number of completed actions. We see about 2 trillion of those a month. And we're seeing that massive growth in those events. And what's driving it? So apps are kind of disrupting almost every single category that can possibly think of. The way in which we dial and call people has entirely changed through the world of Skype and WhatsApp and Viber. We're seeing the music industry change out of all recognition what's happening as to how we consume music. And Pandora and Spotify are finally proving, hurrah, that to the music labels and the artists, that it is a meaningful revenue stream through a part subscription, part ad-funded model. We can see, obviously, games, and my colleague from App Annie is talking a lot about games. You know, in Supercell's recent sale to SoftBank of 51% of the business for $1.5 billion shows that you can really generate significant value and significant revenue. Facebook finally starting to realize significant revenues on mobile and mobile advertising. I was on this stage last year questioning whether Facebook can generate meaningful revenues from advertising. And here we are 12 months later in this entirely different position where they've generated $1 billion from mobile ad revenue in the last quarter. And retailers obviously really started to pick up, you know, where bricks and mortar are really turning into apps and mortar type businesses. So phenomenal growth. And we see app starts growing at a rate like we've never seen before. And frankly, at Flurry, we're not sure what's going on. Yesterday, we saw 1,200 new app starts in one day. So we, again, this time last year, at the beginning of last year, we thought this app revolution had begun. But I just don't think we've seen anything yet. We're seeing yet another mobile content app revolution here today. You can see that from Flurry. App starts are kind of like a good health of the economy. A government might see number of new buildings being built as a sign of a healthy economy. We obviously see apps because as they generate the app and as they prepare to submit them to the stores, they put in Flurry's SDK for analytics. And we saw, you know, nearly 40,000 apps generated in the last quarter. That's the biggest quarter. It's nearly 2 times the number of apps that were starting 12 or 18 months ago. So for app developers out there, are you too late? You're certainly not too late. You know, companies like Supercell are relatively new players in this space, and I think that's what's incredibly exciting. Also, the number of apps that end up really, really killing it are actually few and far between. I don't know whether, if I ask the question, how many apps do you think out there that Flurry track? We track about 35% of all apps in the world. We track about 70% of all the top grossing apps in the world. There are only 875 apps that generate more than 1 million active users. If you look at it at a slightly higher level, how many apps generate more than 20 million monthly actives? That number is actually 32. So of the million apps in the two main stores, there are only 32 that generate more than 20 million active users. And if you're depressed by that number, don't be, because 18 months ago, that number was only 7. So we've seen a 5x increase in the number of apps generating more than 20 million actives. And I often get to speak to developers, and they will talk about number of installs. And frankly, I don't see number of installs as a sign of health. I see active users as a sign of health, dwell time as a sign of health, retention as a sign of health. Because an install is really no more meaningful than a bookmark. Because it's the first step of a very long journey of iterating and continuously developing. And we hope that analytics helps a designer and a developer take that art and that science and combine it. Take that design passion, that flair for a category, but also support it with data to make it a very scientific-driven business. And we're seeing active connected devices around the world still growing at an amazing rate. Almost all countries are growing at a compound annual growth rate of at least 100%. We see 30 countries growing at least 200%. We also see South Korea growing at 0%, which tells you that the South Korean market was one of the most and earliest adopters, yet is now fully saturated. And India and China, obviously a meaningful numbers in terms of penetration and active devices, but don't actually feature in the top charts in terms of growth. Another good sign of health of the app economy is the number of apps that are generated outside the US. Everyone also talks about if you're not a US developer, you can't really make a significant fist of it in the app economy. Actually, for the first time in 2013, that's no longer true. Of the apps that we consume, 64% first year are outside the US. If you look at it another way, which is time spent, then the US economy, app economy is doing slightly better. It's actually 70% of time spent for all users of all smart devices were generated by US app developers. But if you look at it slightly deeper, and say, okay, in the UK, of the UK time spent, how many of those apps were built in the UK? Actually, the answer is only 13%. If you see graph second in UK, you can see that 30%. In Brazil, that number is actually only 8%. And in the US users actually consume of time spent, 60% of those are built in the US, and another 40% built outside the US. And we see that dynamic of globalization and a spread of apps and time spent. Actually, China is an interesting market, and obviously, it's no surprise given the complexities of language and culture that 65% of Chinese users are spending time with apps that are made in China. But that also tells you there's a massive opportunity there. Flurry reported in February that China overtook the US as the largest, most penetrated, most active smart device market in the world. And therefore, from February of this year, China will be forevermore, given its relative size of population to the US, the largest single market from device penetration. So as an app developer, if you can get your local language sorted out and you can really work hard on being culturally relevant to the Chinese, you can really see that there's a massive opportunity there. Running out of time. Penetration in Europe, just want to look at that. Apps are growing at an average of 81%. Europe is growing at an average of 94%. Italy is growing at 120%. But actually explained by this slide, which is installed base on the vertical and device per head of population of all ages across the bottom. Actually, Netherlands, Switzerland, and Sweden are clustered as having relatively high penetration of smart devices per head, but obviously relatively low and small base of installed smart devices. UK is actually a lower penetration per head, but a very large installed base. You can see, therefore, why Italy is growing at 120%. It's got a low device per head, and it's also got a low installed base. I often get asked about, of the time we spend in content in smart devices, how much is that via browser, and how much is that in-app? Our research says that it's about 90-10% of time. So 87% of our time is spent in native apps. And I've obviously described the number of apps that are now being activated. We, on average, open 7.9 apps a week, and we're spending 90% of our time in apps. We might think, well, hang on, I do open the browser a fair bit, but the session time in browsers are usually very short compared to in-app. Average in-app session time is just over 2 minutes. Also, the app time is all the time. You can see across the entire day, we're spending a very consistent, large amount of time across all categories. Obviously, games is the big one. Games is around 40% of all time. It also peaks in the evening. If you look at game time on tablets, that peaks even more. So actually, the gaming device is actually the tablet, and it's concentrated in peak time, and it looks very, very similar to the way in which we consume TV. And actually, the mobile TV is actually already here, everyone. It's called the tablet. And if you wonder where your teenage children are of an evening, they're not sitting watching TV with you anymore. They're actually in the bedroom watching on iPlayer and watching video on demand. So the new TV for the teenagers is 100% in the bedroom. Why would they sit with us and watch TV when they can do it in the privacy of their bedroom? Finally, because I think I am out of time, because there's a big red one there that says I am, the mobile advertising business is growing incredibly fast. So obviously, if you are worrying about where to find audiences and fish where the fish are, fish in-app. We're seeing over 2 hours a day spent in-app, and it's probably the most relevant and most engaging environment to find consumers inside application on smart devices, arguably probably second only to TV. So we can see that in 2013, 14% of digital ad spend will be mobile advertising. That's about $16 billion market. We can see that will grow to 36% share of digital ad spend, or around $59 billion in a matter of 5 years. So this market's going to grow and grow incredibly quickly. Flurry hopes to play its part both in programmatic and manual advertising. With that, I thank you very much.